Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. I am so excited to be on this podcast today sharing this topic because it is one of my favorite topics to explore. It is something that has been fundamental in helping me to reframe how I feel in my body and how I see my body, and just to have more clarity around the menstrual cycle. So most of us have been taught, most of us have been taught very little about our menstrual cycle. But if we have been taught about the 4 different phases of our cycle, we've been taught a very clinical approach to understanding our body. And if you haven't been taught about that your cycle has 4 different stages, don't get caught up on that. A lot of us haven't. In fact, like I said, I think it was in the last podcast that I knew nothing about my cycle until I was in my 30s, which blows my mind that I had lived that long with a bleed and had no idea what was actually happening in my body. So we have 4 phases in our cycle. We have our bleed, our menstruation. We have our follicular phase, which is the part of our cycle after our bleed days, but before ovulation. And this part of our cycle is important because this is the building phase. This is where the body now rebuilds the lining, the uterine lining. It's where it focuses its energy on selecting strong follicles that will be selected for the potential egg that will be released during ovulation. So this is all about rebuilding the foundation, really creating a strong uterus and strong eggs. Then from our follicular phase, we move into our ovulation phase. And most of us know our ovulation phase is that time of our cycle where the egg is released, where we can potentially get pregnant. And if we're tracking our cycle, this is where we're going to see our temperature peak. This is where we're going to see lots of cervical mucus. And this is essentially the opposite of menstruation. So menstruation is that releasing of the uterine lining. It is the darkness. It's the letting go. And ovulation is the complete opposite of the, everything at its peak, everything built right up for the big event. And then as we move through our ovulation, we move into what is known as our luteal phase. Our luteal phase is that time after ovulation, but before our bleed begins. This is the time where if the egg has been fertilized, this is where our body's going to be preparing for the implantation of that egg and preparing for our first trimester of pregnancy. If we haven't gotten pregnant, this is the part of our cycle where our body is going to wait to register that there was no egg implanted. And then we're going to see the progesterone, once that message has been received by the body, progesterone is going to start to decrease, and that's going to initiate the bleed again. In our cycle, a lot of times we look at it as 2 different halves. We look at a half of our cycle that has estrogen and the second half of our cycle that has progesterone. Now, these halves are really the follicular and the luteal phases. They're I think I described it last time as the building phases before we hit the main events. In the main events, what's happening is menstruation. This is when the hormones drop, which allow the body to know that it's time to bleed. Or it's ovulation when hormones are at its peak. There's a cocktail of hormones happening here that everything's coming together to orchestrate that big release of the egg and for a potential pregnancy to come to be. So this is the very clinical approach to our cycle that probably a lot of us know, and it's very, very summarized. I get that. There's a lot of stuff happening in this menstrual cycle. But what I like to do is to shift this awareness from this very clinical approach to one that is really guided and crafted with ancient teachings in mind. So this is getting to what I like to call the sacred womb or the sacred cycle. And the reason why I use sacred is because it's getting back to what women used to see their cycle as versus what medicine or what we're learning online or in textbooks about the cycle. It's a way for us to get deeper, to connect more authentically with our body, and to really begin to see how we are flowing and moving in the cyclical nature, which is really the core of my work. It's really what I love to teach women about and to get them excited about. What I love about taking the menstrual cycle from this very clinical approach and bringing it into more of these sacred, more of these holistic teachings is that it helps really ground us into understanding our body so that we can move from this sensation of feeling broken, feeling overwhelmed, and feeling disconnected to beginning to feel very empowered in our body, to feeling very curious about what's happening in our body, and to really begin to feel inspired by our cycle so that we can live a new way that really fills our tank up. So it's really important that when we look, regardless if it's a medical lens or the sacred lens, is that in both circumstances or both teachings, we're really teaching you that every phase of the cycle has a driving energy. And that driving energy is what helps to support us to move from one spot to the next. And so we really want to optimize and take advantage of the energy that is percolating in each of these 4 unique phases. Because as we do that, we really get to optimize and take in the most connection. I always like to call it the superpowers that lie within our cycle, so that way we can really take advantage of our strengths. Because we do have strengths, and every strength exists in a different phase. They don't exist in all. And so this is really starting to understand our body, so that way we can be everything that we want to be, but just knowing that we can only be it in little tiny parts at a time. So with that being said, let's get into the sacred cycle, the sacred teachings of the womb space. So like I had mentioned before, we have a menstruation, a follicular, an ovulation, a luteal phase. These phases in our body really mimic that's happening in nature and also mimic what happens in the lunar cycle. So if we want to look at it from this sacred lens, we would see that our menstruation is like our inner winter. It is the dark moon. If we look at our follicular phase, what's happening here, this is kind of like our spring season or like the waxing moon. And when we look at ovulation, this is our summertime. This is our full moon. And then the luteal is our fall, is our waning moon. The reason why this is so incredibly helpful for me is I think so many of us, we can identify with the season changes in our environment. We know what it feels like and what we feel like when we're in winter versus when we are in summer. And the same sensation that we feel in the environmental shifts that are happening, we feel that in our physical body as well. It's just that we haven't really been taught to allow ourselves to connect to those sensations. We haven't given ourselves permission or the okayness, I guess you could call it, that it is okay for us to feel different in each of these 4 seasons inside of ourselves. But yet in the environment, we're like, this is totally okay. This is how we're supposed to feel. This is how, everyone else feels. And the reality is that every other woman feels the same cyclical nature in their body. We just haven't been able to identify with it. So let's go through each of these so that we can really deepen into them and really can start to see where the magic lies, where we have strengths in each of these. I personally always like to start in winter because I think winter it's the time of the ending of the year, but it's also this rebirth. It's this idea that everything kind of dies off or goes into hibernation, and it comes out in spring with full force. And this is what's happening in our menstruation. So when we look at our inner winter, I always like to use them as the seasons and then add inner in the before it, because that's what's happening inside our body. So our inner winter is this time where we enter into darkness and we move ourselves into light again. It is this duration of time in our body when our body is letting go the last cycle. Our uterine lining is being released. Our hormones are all dropped, which is making us feel exhausted, which is probably making our brain feel a little sleepy, which is making us feel perhaps a little run down. Our inner winter is when our body focuses on letting go of everything that was so that it can build a new, stronger version in the next cycle. The really cool thing about our menstruation is that as much as this is releasing the uterine lining, it's also creating a cleanse in the body. It is pulling out any impurities or toxins, whether this may be physical stuff in the body. It could also potentially be letting go of emotions. It can be letting go of thought patterns that are keeping us stuck. So this is a time of deep letting go. It is a time where when we are letting go in this process, if we allow ourselves to rest, to reflect, that we can really get a deeper appreciation for what might be happening in our external world. The really cool thing about our winter season, and one of my favorite things that I've learned about menstruation, is that the barrier between the right and left hemisphere of our brain is actually at its thinnest during our bleed days, which means that this is the time our intuition is so incredibly heightened. This is when we can have those really big aha moments, or when we can really have this deep inner knowing and solutions to our problems if we allow ourselves to pause and reflect. Now, what happens in the modern world is this is often when we shut down. We say, you know what? I cannot take time off. I cannot allow myself to rest. I know I'm feeling exhausted. I know I'm feeling run down, but you know what? I can't stop. I have a job. I have a family. I have responsibilities. I can't just take some days off because I'm bleeding, and we push through. This is really important for people to hear if you are somebody who has painful periods or really heavy bleeding, is that we don't allow these physical indicators in our body that are telling us to stop, to rest, to take care of ourselves. We don't listen to them. We say, you know what? Modern society does not allow me time. This is not how it works. I cannot do that. And we push through. I truly, deeply believe it's this pushing through our inner winter, this not allowing ourselves to rest and take time of ease, that causes all these disruptions in the cycle that later on then builds into the problems that we see that show themselves during our luteal phase, our PMS phase. And the reason why I say this is that everything is a precursor. So how well we allow the body to eliminate and to release during menstruation really plays into what the new cycle is building on. So if we don't actually rest, if we don't actually allow the body what it needs to conserve the energy so that it can eliminate, we create that environment where a full release potentially doesn't happen. And then we're building a new lining on old tissue or old emotions or old thinking patterns. We're not actually allowing the body to let go. Now, when we think of our winter, especially if you live somewhere cold, I live in Canada and it is freaking cold here in the winter. And so if you think about what happens in winter, when the snow hits the ground for me, that's when I'm like, I'm done. I'm not going outside anymore. I avoid the cold. I would prefer to drink hot teas, hot soups. This is the time of the year when I really crave no salad whatsoever. My body doesn't want cold things. It wants warm things. It wants to sit in front of a fireplace under a blanket It wants to do less. It wants to watch more Netflix. This is what my body is asking for. It's asking for me to do little and to really nourish itself. Not that Netflix potentially nourishes my body, but it's that turning the dial down and not having to go to achieve. This is what our menstruation is asking of us. Can we step out of our routines, out of our habitual patterns that we're used to doing, and can we allow ourselves to do less? And this is really hard. This is really hard for a lot of women. And what I say is that if you feel like you have all these responsibilities and that you can't step away from life, can you allow yourself just to step back 20%? Can we allow ourselves to do 20% less than what we would normally do? That 20% less is giving the brain the signal that, hey, we understand we need a little less here, and we're taking care of ourselves. We are actually starting to nourish that cycle, and we're registering with the brain that we are living cyclically because we're down, like we're turning that dial down and allowing ourselves to be a little bit more nurturing to ourselves and what our needs are. Now, when we look at each of these seasons have a psychological muscle, or they have something that needs to be nurtured or worked here. And with our inner winter, our psychological muscle is training ourselves that it's okay to let go. It's okay to surrender and to just be here. For us to dip deeper into this surrendering, it's really about us daring to believe that nothing is urgent on these days. That we can unlock our power here by surrendering and resting. If we surrender and rest, we give ourselves the opportunity to come out of these dark days with new aha moments. Traditionally, what would happen during a bleed day is there would be red tents for women to escape to. And red tents weren't designed as this place for women to hide out in because, they were cranky and so forth. These red tents were designed as a way to honor the woman's intuition, to honor that she had a special skill set, and that if we let her rest and if we gave her quiet space during her bleed days, that she would come out and she would help lead the community into the next coming month of what would be best for the community. We really were leaders, and we were leaders because we were given this time to rest. Rest was seen during our bleed days as essential to our health. And it is one of the first things that was let go of when we shifted with the industrial world, when we decided that we had to change with these new modern times that were coming in. We let go of the rest, and the rest is so incredibly important. So if you take anything away from this podcast today I want you to take away the importance of rest and how this will help to strengthen that muscle of your intuition, help you strengthen your inner knowing, and really help you to balance your health and well-being. Now, as we move from our inner winter, we move into our inner spring. And just like what happens outside, when we move from winter to spring, there is this thawing of the ground. We start to see the snow melt. We start to see buds on the tree. We start to see little green tufts of grass coming through that old brown stuff. It is like the growth of the new summer that's about to happen, when everything's full in bloom. This really is this time of welcoming in the new. And this is what's happening inside our body. Inside our body, there is this new lining, this new set of eggs that are going to be released, or follicles that are going to be developed and nurtured to come out. And just like what we feel in the outer spring, our external world, of this refreshness, this new energized life, this is what's happening in our body. So when we finish our bleed and we start to enter into our follicular phase, when we start to enter into this inner spring, estrogen comes back into the system. The hormone estrogen starts to rise here. And estrogen is like that hormone that makes us feel very extroverted. Even if you're introverted, right now this season is asking you to be a little bit more extroverted. It's priming our brain for language. It's making us feel social. It's helping us become critical thinkers. We are quick here to thought. This is a time when our body just starts to come back into the world and says, hey, let's play, let's have fun, let's talk about things, let's start to create. And that is what's happening in our inner spring. This estrogen is driving us to want to go out there, to start sharing our ideas, to start sharing what came through our menstruation, to really tackle those big projects. We feel so much life and energy here. And I always like to think of spring is always the same thing that I do every year in the external spring. Every year, as soon as I see the snow melt where I live, and I see the sun shining bright, like it just seems like it's that much brighter when spring comes. Right away, I'm always so excited. And I, throw on my little Tom shoes. I don't bring a jacket. I go into my garage, jump into my car. I drive to my destination. And then the moment I get out of my car, I'm like, oh my God, it's so cold outside. Where's my jacket? Why am I wearing these little shoes? Every time, this is what happens with the external spring, is that I get so excited, so energized by seeing and sensing the life coming to being, coming into that bloom state outside, that everything inside me also wants to come into that bloom state. The reason why I share this is because this is what's happening internally, is that we're feeling this rising energy, and it can be really potent for some of us. So it can be this energy that makes us want to go, 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 but we forget that we jump in of go, go, go for everyone and everything in our life. So to really nourish ourselves in our inner spring is really about, allowing ourselves to be playful, allowing ourselves to have that outward burst of energy, but also reminding ourselves that this is a time to come out as us, to lean into our uniqueness, to shine who we are, to really cherish ourselves. And we do this by re-emerging into that outside world from our menstruation with a little bit of caution that we can be very vulnerable here. That if we come out too quickly out of our cocoon and with too much force of energy, we allow ourselves to get shocked by the coldness that still exists in the beginning stages of that spring. So we really need to take our time and make sure that when we're extending ourselves, when we are offering to do these things, when we're getting super excited about something as we come out of our bleed days, that we're doing it slow enough that we're still being cautious of how we feel and we're not burning ourselves out. So how we really nurture ourselves and nurture our power here is about checking in with ourselves, about celebrating who we are, about cherishing who we are, and about still having healthy boundaries before we say yes to everybody here. And then from our spring, we move into our summer. Now, our summer is most people's favorite season. And it's really what society likes. Modern society is set up for every woman to live in a non-stop inner summer. That's what it wants. Because our inner summer is a time where we not only have estrogen, but now we have testosterone in the cycle. We have progesterone starting to peak a little bit here. It's starting to come into the equation to help prepare for that ovulation. And so we have this cocktail of hormones. We have the best of the best coming here. And this is what makes us charismatic. This is what makes people drawn to us and makes us want to be seen. We really want to be seen here. We have endorphins that are being released during ovulation so that we're not just attracting people, but that we feel attractive here. This is us coming out and saying, I want the world to know who I am. We're usually generally really talkative here. We generally can stay up really late here and take on way too many tasks and yet not feel burnt out. And the reason is because our hormones are peaking here. We were built to keep going if we needed to here. This is like the height of all heights in our cycle. And so we can do a lot here. We can really, become playful. We can really challenge ourselves to overdo it and not feel the repercussions of that. If you can imagine the external summer, this is often when we are out visiting friends till all hours. We have vacations planned. We pile on the schedule a lot, and yet we still feel joy and excitement. But this is the inner summer. This is what's happening inside us. So our psychological muscle that's happening, or that needs to be really nurtured here in our summer, is how can we show up with our uniqueness? How can we really express who we are? And the thing is that it's safe to express who we are here because people want to see who we are. They want to be part of our presence. It's really quite amazing when you watch it. So it's important to know that something right now is blossoming in you. This is when you are coming into full bloom. And if we allow it, we're able to release ourselves out into the world without fears, without holding back. And we're really showing the world who we are. So this is really about creating community, gathering, and celebrating. That's what ovulation is all about. That's what our summer is all about. And then from summer, we move into our fall. And I always like to think of my fall as that time, if you have kids, usually the summer, on summer break, we pack everything in. We do everything that we can possibly do before school starts. And I don't know about everyone else, but I know for myself that by about August 20th, I'm always like, oh my God, how much longer till school starts? Because I'm missing the routine. I am missing having structure. I am missing the stillness or the quietness. This is what fall is all about. Fall is about us stepping back into a routine, about setting boundaries and really allowing ourselves to have a container to work within and to take care of ourselves in. Our fall is when estrogen completely drops and progesterone starts to take over. Now, progesterone is a warming kind of hormone. It is a hormone that can make us really feel lazy, lethargic. It starts to sedate the mind. So all that quick thinking that we had in our spring is now gone. This is often when I have a hard time thinking of the words that I need to think of, or when I stumble on my words. This is when I feel like I want to get things done. Like, this is my favorite time to have sticky notes. I have sticky notes everywhere during my fall because it's me finishing off all the to-dos. It's like, I don't know what happens to me, but I just want to get things cleared up. I want to finalize things. I want to organize things. This is the time in my cycle where I get stuff done, and it feels good to get stuff done. But it's also the time in my cycle that this getting things done is getting things done by myself. I don't deal well if I have to cater to other people or if I have to run around or care for other people. I usually end up starting to feel a little sharp. I often start to feel like I'm being overextended. And that's because our fall is really asking us to step out of everyday life and start to care for ourselves. Because you remember, our luteal phase is trying to prep and help a pregnancy to happen. So progesterone really is about prepping for pregnancy. It's about asking ourselves, can we stop and slow down so that we can create a life? And even if we're not trying to create a life, this is progesterone saying, can we stop and slow down and marinate in whatever it is we crafted and created at the first half of our cycle? Can we look at what needs to be fine-tuned and refined? And can we complete things here So that way we can move in to our rest state, so that we can actually stop and check out. And that's what our fall is asking us. So when we think of like our inner fall as this time of PMSing is a result of us doing things for other people when progesterone is making us feel tired, lethargic, and wanting to be alone. It is the shift from being outward to inward. Progesterone is very much an inward hormone. It's asking us to be by ourselves. So how we care for ourselves in our inner fall is taking more time outs for ourselves. It's about asking for help and not helping others. It's about saying, hey, I need to like downshift here, or I need to go and just read quietly for a half an hour by myself, or I just need to be in the bedroom by myself. This is a time often in my own relationship where I don't want to be touched. Like I don't want hugs. I just want my own personal space. I want to be in my own little bubble. And the thing is that if I get that space, if I get that little bubble, I feel balanced. I don't get cranky. I don't feel sharp with people. So our inner fall is a lot about taking care of ourselves. It's about setting strong boundaries so that we can nurture ourselves. It's about coming inwards and really allowing ourselves to be nothing to anybody but ourselves. So how can we hold space for ourselves? How can we really anchor into our own needs and take care of ourselves here? That is how we nurture our inner fall. And then we go back into our winter, where then we allow ourselves to gently rest because we know that we cleared off those to-dos, and we start the cycle again. And we rest and take care of ourselves, and we do less, so that way we can come out and be of service again, so we can have that springboard of estrogen to go out into the world, to talk about all the amazing ideas that we have, to share our energy, to get things in motion, to come back in that cycle, to come back into our fall, where we're like, okay, let's clear up the tasks. Let's look at what wasn't dealt with. Let's clean up the things that didn't work out. And let's prepare for ourselves to go back into rest. And we keep rinsing and repeating. And this is our cycle. And when we live this way, I truly believe we have so much more self-compassion. Because now I know that when I get cranky in my fall, it's because I'm feeling the pressures of so many people wanting things from me, and my whole body, my whole system saying, please no. Please, 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 please no. And I also know that when I feel that rush of energy in the spring and I want to say yes to everything, I know that I have to turn back in a little bit and go, okay, is some of this for you as well? Or are you doing this for everybody else? Because if you're doing this for everybody else, the resentment's going to come back in the fall. It's going to come back in as that inner critic, and it's going to tell you, hey, you did nothing for you. And so my spring is checking in with myself of like, yes, I can be a lot of things, but am I still being a lot of things for myself as well? And then the summer is just about playing. It's about having fun. It's about pushing the boundaries. It's about, just really taking it all in and being seen. As women, we're so afraid to be seen. This is our time to be seen and know that people want to see us. And then menstruation, I totally just retreat. I allow myself to do less. My secret to a healthy menstruation is no cooking, no cleaning, and no extras for anybody else. That's my 20%. I do the base minimum, and I feel so good when I come out of it. And I can tell you that I was somebody who had very painful periods. And now my period comes on almost like a secret little ninja. I don't even know it's going to come because I no longer have pain. I have balance in my body, but that's because I have a balanced cycle where I'm operating in a cyclical way that's really nurturing my physical body, but it's also nurturing my inner body, my soul, my emotions. I'm taking care of myself on so many different planes. And that is the power of the cycle. That is how we deepen into understanding our body and moving in a way that just makes us feel alive. And then once you get this down as the foundation, then you can start weaving this into how can I incorporate this into my relationship, my conversations with my partner? How can I weave this in to how I show up as a parent? How do I have to set boundaries? Where do I need to set boundaries? Once we understand the foundations of our cycle, we can move mountains in all aspects of our life with it. It has completely transformed everything I know about my body. So I encourage you to go and download my free cycle chart, because that will give you a chart. It'll give you some information about the cycle, and you can start charting your cycle so you can start to see where it is you are in your cycle, and you can start to track how you feel. And once you know how you feel, you're going to start to see similarities that happen month after month after month. You're going to notice on day 20, you feel the same way every month. It's crazy. You're going to notice that those big feelings that you have, those big fears or doubts, or when you always say yes to everything, it happens around the same day. It's pretty mind-blowing in my mind when I looked at 3 months of my cycle and started to see that I did have a pattern and that it constantly repeated approximately on the same day. And this is what's happening for you. And once we know that, that is the empowerment, because now we know how to operate and move with our cycle so that we're not depleting ourselves, so we're not beating ourselves up with the emotional bat. So go get the chart, start charting your cycle, know where you're at, and then let's hop back into the Facebook group and start talking about what we're noticing. Start talking about our patterns. Let's start normalizing the cycle in this really unique way that makes us feel empowered. And I'm going to put it out there too, that if you haven't got on my newsletter yet, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, hop over and do that, because on January 1st, I'm going to be releasing an email out to everyone on my list with a special gift for your cycle. And you're not going to want to miss out on this. This is a freebie that's going to be coming to you that will not be found on my website. This is something that's only going to be for those that are subscribed on January 1st, 2023. Oh my gosh, we're almost in 2023. So please go sign up on the newsletter so that you can get this free gift that will be coming out in a few days. Until next time, remember, your womb wisdom equals deeper connection to yourself, which equals inspired living. And that's what we're here doing today in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. Make sure that you go and subscribe and like this episode if it resonated with you, so that others can find this podcast and that we can shift and change how women feel in their bodies. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode.